Today is Friday. Kind of feel like drawing. Here's some pen. On the diet with a 6-year-old. I love Cheez-Its. So I get asked a lot, Tate, how do you draw with a ballpoint pen? Doing a few sketches with M pencil where you can erase, or just in pen, you don't have to try and correct your mistakes and you just move forward. Feel like this? Walt Whitman did a painting on this guy. You just go from light to dark. So my style of drawing is a bit more squiggly. And it all started from being up late at night and blurring my eyes. Before I show you how to draw like me, let's gather some things. Whenever I start any drawing, I like to view it as a forest because when you start drawing a forest, you don't start drawing the individual trees. You start drawing the general form of all the trees gathered together. So you don't miss the forest for the tree. When you look at this guy right here, I'm not gonna try and draw his eye first or his mouth first. I just wanna get a general shape of his form and body. So that's pretty general. You wanna start out really light because these lines, they may not be right at all, but they're more like reference points as I go along. And then his eye socket right there is slanted less steeply to the left. Is it going in the opposite direction? Then you see the shape of his little face right here, from his cheekbones to his chin. First a outer curve, so very straight looking backwards written S. Make sure that as we go along things are lining up, and what I mean by that is his chin ends right here, and directly at this angle his eye ends right at the same point where his chin ends. It goes this way, some less steep, flat, and then steep. None of these lines are probably going to exist later on, but I'll choose from them as I go further. His eye line from right here is going to be about there, and his nose curves into his cheekbone. Light is hitting him from this side. Thing to remember, since things that are further away are going to be smaller than things that are closer to you, and so since his head is facing this way, the left eye is closer than the right eye, so therefore this eye is going to be smaller than that one. Is about 2/3 of his face down from the tip of his chin. And this guy comes out right about his chin from about the midpoint of his cheek or his chin. This line of his neck that's in the shadow, this area around his neck. Then you have this X thing right about here. These are the tendons and veins of his neck. So you have from about his ear, comes down, and then you have this one that comes out from his neck, are going to be lighter. And one of the best ways to make something look lighter is make everything around it seem darker. Just try a little bit of his arm. Comes out about right here of his neck. His upper delt of his shoulder is right here, see that? And then his lower delts and shoulder muscles are right about here. And his tricep, which is that line right there, curving back around from his shoulder, which comes out and comes in, part of his collarbone or chest bone. As that line right there ends, come out a little bit, his bicep, and we'll leave that, starts to curve out. Waistline, about there. You see right here, this is a little bit lighter than the rest of his entire body. Chest muscles, or his pectoral muscles right here, that curves a little bit and then it ducks down. And since this pectoral muscle is closer than that one, it's going to be bigger. And then right here, where his stomach folds a little bit, part of his hip. Right here across his chest, two of these bones, see those two shadows come across. And they're going to be slanted since he's sort of bent over at his side and his main form is like at this angle. So everything that was at this angle is going to shift the same way the rest of his body did. And this part is going to be darker. The knee sort of comes up right about there. As his quad ends and attaches to his kneecap right here at that pivot where it goes from this angle to that angle, his cloth that comes from his chin right here shifts down. Right at his chest line does his index finger. So that, then right at where his stomach line is his pinky. And then his kneecap. And then the cloth on his left side coming around from his torso, right above his hip muscle. And it comes down about like that, part of his V line. And then that was that main line coming around like that. And then along the ridge of it, it's gonna be lighter, at least all the way up until right here. So go ahead and mark that. And then right about here, it starts drooping down. Right before his teardrop muscle of his lower quad out, a little like that, and then come down. And then this part of his body, all right here, darker since he's hunched over and he's blocking the light. Go ahead and start doing the cloth, sort of slant, slant, slant. And then the top part of that strip is right about where his cheekbone is. So this part of his delts, that'll come around right there. And then his shoulder muscle is more, those angles here where his shoulder muscles meet his delts and his upper back muscles right here. There's a curve that comes right there, that shadow line that meets with his collarbone muscles, his back muscles, as well as his delts. And his shoulder is a bit rounder, doesn't have much fat on him. And then it curves around that muscle right there that meets his shoulder muscles with his delts and his back. And this little part, this little triangle, that's gonna have to get really dark because we're gonna have to shade in some of this. See this line right here that curves down from his chin? There are three. There's this one that curves, I just pointed out. And then there's this one on this side. And then you can see the bottom of it, right in between that collarbone and this first vein. This one a little wider than expected. And then this is going to be dark. Right here is going to get really dark. Also notice how his background is much darker than his actual body in the cloth. These lines like around his head or this shoulder line can be just darkened out if I were to do the background or foreground. But this shoulder muscle, something good to do. Cloth, water, and clouds are some of the hardest things to draw. And volume is a vocab word for darkness and lightness, black and white. The reason being why cloth is one of the hardest things to draw is if you look right here, these irregular patterns of shade, extremely hard to make out to the untrained eye. And so something that I started doing was getting a light board. You can use a pane of glass if you want, it's the same thing, and put your phone under it. You use painter's tape, less likely to tear the paper, which is pretty much just fancy masking tape. This thing called tracing paper, which makes it a little bit easier. It's essentially just fancy wax paper. It's all taped over, so as I'm drawing over it, it won't move, but it does that. See how much you've done, you can like turn it off. So that's about right. Since this is all dark, I'm not gonna shade it, but when I go back over to my drawing, this is going to be sort of like a guide or map. There's that. So there's this one that comes down. So the distance from the top and bottom of his hand is the same distance from the top of his hand to the lower part of his delt. Coming from his kneecap, the outside area going to be lighter. It comes out like that, and then like a little bit slanted. Right about here is his ankle. So let's go ahead and do the rest of the arm and the leg, then his arm. If you want to do the background, his head length will actually be right there, and then this comes down to his shoulder, and another head length. So yeah, that would be St. Jerome in the Wilderness. Hope that this might have helped you in some kind of way. If not, please help me out. Maybe critique me in the comments. Thanks.